All right, everyone. Welcome to the Transportation Commission meeting on March 10th. I'm calling this meeting to order at 6 o'clock p.m. Jennifer, can you please do a roll call?
Nick.
Here.
Skylar.
Here.
Mark.
Here.
Andy.
Here.
Brett.
Here.
And Brooke.
Here. Okay, with that, we'll move on to approval of agenda. I'm seeking a motion to approve the agenda.
I'll make a motion to approve the agenda. Second.
It's been moved and seconded. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, nay. Motion carries. Next, we will go to brief announcements from staff, commissioners, and council liaison. This is the time for brief announcements from city staff, commissioners, and our council member liaison. Councilmember Davis, do you have anything this evening?
I'm just going to say hi. I don't have anything to say per se. I missed the last month's meeting, so I didn't get a chance to say hi. And look forward to coming to future meetings. See what's going on here.
Great. Thank you for being here this evening. Do the commissioners have any announcements? Yes, Andy.
Thank you. So for council member liaison, nice to meet you, Mandy. And in addition to serving on this commission, I also serve on the YOLO Transportation District Citizens Advisory Committee. So I typically provide some updates on what's going on that side of things. I have a few quick updates tonight. Firstly, my colleague on the YOLO TD CAC, Steve Streeter, who, as some of you may know, succeeded his late son Nathan to serve our community on that committee, has retired from the CAC after several years. His last meeting was last week. So because of that, so first wanted to thank him for his service. I know he served our community, him and Nathan served our community both on the CAC, and I know he was on the Planning Commission and some other capacities as well, so I wanted to thank him for his years of service for the city. And also, as you may know, since I'm an at-large member, I'm not officially the Davis representative. The Davis seat on the CAC is now open, so if you or anyone you may know is interested in that, I would suggest reaching out to Councilmember Chapman, who is David, our city's representative on the YOLO TD board, to ask for more info about that and potentially seek a nomination. So updates on some recent YOLO bus developments. Firstly, the Woodland Transit Center, which I've provided updates on a couple of times. Unfortunately, the Woodland City Council at a meeting last month rejected the Second and Court location that YOLO T had proposed for a downtown transit center. So now YOLO, for next steps on that, YOLO TD intends to improve lighting and add private security at the existing County Fair Mall Transit Center while continuing to work with Woodland to find a more agreeable downtown location. And for context on that, that's been going on for more than 7 years at this point, so it's uncertain what the timeline for that might be. But also in the meantime, YOLO TD is going to look at rerouting the 42 in Woodland to better serve downtown and also move the layover location for that line out of County Fair Mall as part of its short-range transit plan. Also something that y'all may be interested in is the service to Winners. The microtransit service for Winners also has doubled as the main transit connection between here and Winners and Vacaville since the pandemic. And the YOLO TD board will be voting tonight on expanding the hours of that microtransit service and also adding a second vehicle to improve reliability. That's something that the CAC recommended unanimously to approve, the board approved last week, so we'll see what they do. And YOLO TD is also looking at restoring fixed route service to Winners. As a reminder, they have not operated fixed route service to there since before the pandemic, but as part of the short-range transit plan, they're looking at potentially bringing that back. Also, as you may know, the A's will be starting play in West Sacramento next month. And YOLO Bus does plan to run an extra 42A bus back to Davis after games, so that could be a good option for going to games, whether or not you support the A's, given the latest developments with them. Also, and then last but not least, an update on the I-80 construction is that the Causeway Bike Path is scheduled to be closed from late Wednesday evening through early Friday morning, so the biggest impact will be Thursday when it's closed during daylight hours. And also the YOLO TD expects the groundbreaking of the groundbreaking ceremony for the YOLO 80 widening project to occur this April, which means construction will be, don't expect a relief from the construction anytime soon, was YOLO TD's main message on that. Our next meeting is May 5th at 6 p.m. Those are at YOLO TD headquarters in Woodland.
Great, thank you very much. Any other commissioner announcements? If not, Jennifer or Ryan, do you have any announcements?
Yeah, I've got a couple of things. So first, I wanted to announce that the city has received 2 grant awards through the Highway Safety Improvement Program that Caltrans administers. One is to $240,000 to install buffered bike lanes on Lake Boulevard between Russell and Arlington. The other one is a little over $300,000 to install, do crosswalk improvements at 3 locations in town, including rapid rectangular flashing beacons, enhanced signage, striping. And those locations are Canterbury Loop at the Dog Park, B at 7th, and then F at 6th. I wanted to announce that last week the installation of the speed humps was completed for both Canterbury Loop and Temple Drive, so those are in place. I wanted to remind the commissioners that we're looking at a tentative special joint meeting with several commissions to talk about the general plan on April 23rd. And if you could let us know your availability after this meeting, that would be appreciated. And then there's a couple of transit and transportation conferences that UC Davis has that I wanted to bring to your attention. The transit conference would be April 17th, and the transportation conference would be October 21st through 23rd. And these are all one-day events where you could learn more about those different elements of transportation. That's all I've got.
Jennifer, was there anything you want to add? With that, I'm going to open the meeting up for public comment. At this time, any member of the public may address the commission on matters which are not listed on this agenda or are listed on the consent calendar. Speakers will be limited no more than 3 minutes, and speakers will be asked to speak at the podium and state their names for the record.
I'm Ro Bessard. I was here last month and was in the meeting. Brett said he thought that my North Davis bike loop proposal should be moved forward, and he hoped that there would be signs up by summer. And that inspired me to make a video based on this one I showed last week. And at 12:30 this morning, we finally got it up on YouTube. And I've handed out a sheet to everyone, and I'm hoping that an improved, revised version of that video will be the main thing that we use to promote riding on the bike loop. Almost the only change I've made in the last month is that I showed this to some members of the Davis Bike Club, and one of them spent 5 minutes urging me to add one more amenity near the bike loop, but not on it. That was the Great Bear Winery, which is just north of Davis. And I went out to the Great Bear Winery, and Marcus, the co-owner, said he would, of course, be very happy for that publicity. And he thought that the Chamber of Commerce would use that to help induce people to come to Davis and who wanted to do wine tasting, but also biking. And that's all new I have to add. I was hoping that this advisory commission would endorse this and send it forward to the city council in the near future. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Earl. Is there any other public comment? Or any staff, does staff want to respond?
So I haven't had time to look at the most recent proposal in detail. We do have an item on the events calendar to talk about signage, updating the city's bicycle map, and then getting our update for the city's wayfinding sign program to you for review. It's probably going to be May or June, looking at the schedule. We can definitely talk about that more in the events calendar section.
Great, thank you. Yeah, can commissioners respond on public comment?
Just to know to clarify that I love the idea of adding the winery to route. Going there by County Road is equally dangerous. I've done it once with my kids, never again. So I think the way to do this is to try and find a way across the little easement. Maybe just a dirt path and get there to the back door. And then I can just imagine if you're living, not even in North Davis, but anywhere in Davis, getting there on a bike path on like a pleasant summer night and getting back home again on your bikes should be a wonderful thing. Just want to support that idea, but with the caveat that right now there is no safe way to get in that bike.
Great, thank you, Mark. Is there any public comment this evening? Okay, if there's no other public comment, we'll move on to the consent calendar. Items on the consent calendar are non-controversial and can be approved with one motion. Would anyone like to make a motion to approve the consent calendar, or are there items that would like to take off the calendar right now?
I would like to propose a amendment to the minutes from last meeting.
Okay. Can he just highlight the changes then?
Yep.
And then we can accept them?
Yep, please highlight the
Yeah.
change.
So the change is that in addition to sharing that I was in 2 collisions, the point was that I was in 2 collisions during to and from school hours, and one of them with my child. And it was pertinent because the topic of that meeting was safe routes to school. So I requested that detail was added because it was pertinent to the topic. That's it.
I can make that change, and the minutes have changed since, I guess, the creation of the Transportation Commission. We have this new structure for minutes, which are very, very brief, and the purpose of that is to just capture the essence, and everything that you say is being captured on over the owl and recorded to help, document your complete thoughts, and these are just, very short snippets of what you say, but I will add that on your behalf. Thank you.
With that amendment to the minutes, do we have a motion to accept the consent calendar?
So
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries.
I'm supposed to abstain, I'm supposed to abstain, right?
Yeah.
Since you were.
Yes, you are. Thank you.
Yeah, just
Yeah.
one.
Okay, motion carries with one abstention. Next, we will take up the regular items. These are our regular agenda items. For these items, we'll receive a presentation. The commissioners will have a chance to ask clarifying questions about the presentation and staff report. Please hold all comments and discussion until after we hear public comment. Commissioners must be open to new ideas and listen to public comment. After public comment, we can then discuss the item and provide our own comments. With that, I will turn it over to
I'm here to introduce Melody Eldridge. She's one of our senior civil engineers at the City of Davis and also the project manager for the Anderson Road project. So take it away, Melody.
Thanks, Jennifer, and thank you, commissioners, for having me here tonight. So yes, I'm here to discuss the Anderson Road Chavez Elementary School Improvements Project. This is a joint project between the City of Davis and the DJUSD to improve the phase of Anderson Road that's directly in front of the Chavez Elementary School. This comes out of the Anderson Road visioning process that goes all the way from Russell Boulevard up to Cobell. So basically, this is phase 1 of a larger picture. In 2021, the city received some grant funding from SACOG. The city and Chavez Elementary received grant funding from SACOG to do this project, and so we are working our way through. So there's sort of 3 components to this project, as you'll see here highlighted. There's an on-site improvement project, which is where the current drop-off that's on Anderson Road, where there's lots of potential conflicts between the student drop-off space and the bicycles, buses, vehicles, all sorts of movement happening there, come into conflict. So that yellow on-site portion is one aspect. There's permanent right-of-way improvements, that's that red section going from Amherst up to Villanova. And then there's some temporary paint improvements that will be from Villanova up to Radcliffe. These are a combination of transition improvements in order to do a lane reduction. There's currently a lane reduction in front of Chavez Elementary, but we need to move it a little bit to make it a little bit safer. And then also as a pilot project for the Villanova Drive intersection for future permanent improvements. So I was just going to work my way from south to north and kind of give an overview of what's happening with these proposed 30% design plans. So these are very early design plans, and these are also only for the right-of-way. The school district, we are partnering with them, and we have a common shared designer overseeing the entire project. But we will not be going over their improvements. They're doing their own outreach, a little bit in coordination with us. They're looking at different things. So I'm only sharing today the right-of-way improvements. So again, starting south to north, so from left to right, just kind of orienting yourself. Amherst is tees into Anderson Road right there, and there's an existing pedestrian flashing beacon and a crosswalk. And right there is where we remove our two-way left and we start to make our changes. There will be on the, well, top side, north side of the page, but we're going to go with, that's the west side of the road. We're going to be swapping the parking and the bicycle lane so that the bicycles, as they come down Anderson Road southbound, will be protected by the parking and by a buffered bike lane. There will also be a buffered bike lane going north, and you can see that there. There will also be some minor, I wouldn't call them quite intersection improvements, driveway improvements right there. That's going to be on the far right side of your page where you see the green bicycle conflict zone. That's going to be our exit from the elementary school improvements. So when the changes happen on site and all of the drop off happens on site, then the parents and their vehicles will be coming out of that driveway and making a right turn only onto Anderson as part of their exit movement. So there will be a lot more activity at that driveway than presently. Right now that driveway is a entrance exit onto the site for only staff vehicles, and in the future it will be an exit only for all vehicles exiting Chavez Elementary. Moving further north, that gives you kind of a better picture of what's happening at Chavez Elementary. And really the big change of this project is, like I said, moving the drop-off zone onto Chavez Elementary School proper. And in order to do that, we're going to open up basically an entrance at Rutgers Drive. And that's going to be full intersection improvements at Rutgers Drive, slight bulb outs. We're going to have a left-hand turn from northbound Anderson, you can see that there, to allow vehicles to enter into the drop-off zone, and also a new right-hand turn southbound to allow for drop-off from that direction. There will be a pedestrian scramble phase as part of this, so that any students walking to school will have a nice, clean, safe, one pedestrian time for crossing the street here. Making our way further north, we just see here the big, there's a couple big changes. The first change I want to highlight though is that I think I spoke briefly, currently there's a lane reduction on Anderson, and that lane reduction happens just after Villanova Drive. That's the big intersection shown here. We're going to be moving that lane reduction north of Villanova Drive, and so it'll be one lane of traffic in each direction as you go through here. And then the big change here is that we will be trying to implement a bus island. So that's that southwest corner. It's that big gray one there. These are going to be done in paint as we've currently proposed. And so what will happen is vehicle bus users will come down to the street level to a protected bollarded area. The bus will come and pick them up there. And then as shown in the green bicycle striping, bicycles will pass through that space as well. So also seeking comments on this. This is a newer thing, and there's some examples of kind of these pedestrian refuge islands. Those are shown in the upper right-hand corner. There also can be a good way to ask for public art and incorporate public art into a public project, so just noting that there. We're doing smaller bulb outs at the other corners that do not have bus stops currently. And sort of similarly, these will also be done in paint, with the idea that with future improvement projects, if we like the improvements, they would be solidified into a permanent project. And then lastly, just continuing up north, this is the last section of the project, and this is again done entirely in paint because it is anticipated to be resurfaced in a future project. And this is the section between Villanova and Radcliffe Drive. Really just a few changes here of that lane reduction happening again right after Radcliffe rather than right after Villanova, and some buffered bike lanes. And with that, that is actually the full extent of a brief overview. The plans were also included in your packets. And yeah, happy to take any comments.
Great, thank you very much for the presentation. At this point, we'll have clarifying questions from commissioners. Are there any questions from commissioners?
Yeah, I have a question. Thank you for the presentation. When we talk
Absolutely.
When we talk about paint versus thermoplastic, that simply has to do with the permanence of the marking on the ground. It is in both cases basically paint of a different quality and permanence.
Yes, so that's one aspect. When we say in paint, it'll be a shorter amount of time. It'll be cheaper upfront, but won't be maintained as long. The other thing when I say in paint for these intersection improvements in particular is typically bulb outs like this would often be done in concrete. You'll see that mostly around town, and concrete is much more expensive than paint. So that's one other big distinction when it comes to in particular these improvements at Villanova is in a future world where we really like these improvements, they would be cast in concrete, most likely.
Andy?
Thank you for the presentation. So a question about focused on the bus stops and the bus island you were discussing. Have you coordinated with Unitrans on that? And do you have what are their general thoughts on it?
Yeah, so we spoke with Unitrans, and they say it's definitely serviceable to do this, and they are concerned about ADA access to this, and that's something we're looking into. Even for a temporary improvement, we would have to make sure it's fully accessible.
Thank you.
I have a couple of questions. I understand that the project in the drop-off area for the school is same consultant but different projects. In terms of coordination between the city's project and the school district's project, are there any mitigations for trying to reduce drop-off in the use of that drop-off area, and is there any analysis of the queuing and how that's going to affect the entrance driveway there?
Let me start with the second question, so a little more straightforward. Yes, the consultant has collected traffic data for what we've seen out there right now for current drop-off. They've done some analysis based on that to figure out what they think the queuing would be, especially at the intersection with Rutgers, and how that would operate in the long term. All these left turn pockets were sized to accommodate the 95th percentile queues that they were estimating based on that. Conversations with the district and that partnership are still ongoing. I don't think we've really broached the subject of what can be done to try to shift additional traffic out of automobiles and onto bikes or walking. But that's definitely something we'll be exploring, probably more through the active Fort Meade program.
The second question I had, again, kind of related to that entrance into the school. It looks right now that the protection for that bike lane there would just be, at that point, I guess, thermoplastic or whatever's intended to go in there. Observing that a lot of cars tend to use the bike lanes as turn lanes and queuing area, is there any protection for that bike lane around the entrance driveway there?
There isn't currently any plan, but that's a good comment, and we'll make sure to note that.
Thank you. Are there any other commissioner comments? Clarifying questions?
I'll wait till after public comment for discussion.
If there's no more clarifying questions, at this point, we'll take public comment on the project. Again, please step to the podium and you have 3 minutes.
All right, thank you. My name is Gary Sandler, and I have a concern, and I hope that staff will speak to this, about the joint bikeway and bus drop-off area. That seemed like an area for great contention and perhaps injury. And I hope that they can clarify how they're going to manage traffic through that space. Thank you.
Thank you.
Anthony Palmier, and I guess I cut in front of Trish because I wanted to talk about the bus stop as well. For those who don't know me, I'm the former general manager at Unitrans, and the concept there is something that's commonly referred to as a floating bus stop, and you see it in a lot of cities, and it's actually in the city's street standards now as the preferred option, because it allows the buses and bikes to not have to keep weaving and crossing each other. It allows the buses to go straight and make a stop, and then people come across an island to get to the bus stop. And then the bike path then is continuous. But the problem here is that you can't do that with paint, with just paint. And because what you want to do is have a level path from the curb to the bus stop for ADA or just anyone who, they're not going to be able to come down from the curb and then come onto the bus, because then the ramp from the bus doesn't line up with the curb. It's down on the street level, and that's too high a slope to get in. So paint doesn't just work. So what you need to do, and there are quick build ways of doing this without concrete, by putting rubberized material in there. So you basically build a little speed table, and then that gets to perhaps the previous commenter's concern of the conflict between the bikes and the buses, because the bikes then are going to slow down slightly to go up and then onto this flat surface and then come down, and they'll naturally do that. And the only time there's a conflict is when there's a bus there, because people coming in or out. So obviously they might have to stop if there's actually a lot of people getting on or off there. It's not a very busy stop, so I wouldn't expect that to happen. But anyway, the idea is that to have this in place, and it's something you see now in lots of places, Oakland, Seattle, they have a lot of these, in Portland, they have a lot of these floating bus boarding areas. But if this is going to be our first one, we need to do it right. We don't want to have something that's going to cause problems, and I think this would. Thank you.
Thank you, Anthony.
Hi, my name's Trish Price. I'm with Bike Davis, and just want to point out that a really critical piece of mode shifting is the safety of the street for the vulnerable users, particularly. I don't really understand the odd swoops that the bike lane takes. It seems unnecessary. I know it's to accommodate car parking, but do we really need to have the car parking? I think we could ask ourselves. We also would like to really press for protected lanes. We've seen on Fifth Street that we've had to rely on that paint for many, many years, way too many years. It's not a safe situation for cyclists or pedestrians at Fifth and L, between Pole Line and L. So we may be depending on this paint to keep these kids safe for a long time. The money may not be forthcoming, especially in this current climate, so let's keep that in mind. And the bollards would be something, it's not much, but it's something to protect the kids. It's also a concern that kids get out of the car on the passenger side, which is now the bike lane, in the drop-off zone, I believe, if I'm understanding the diagrams correctly. Correct me if I'm wrong, but you know, the adults are not great at looking back, and I've seen people get doored there. I volunteered at Chavez for many years, scanning kids at the bike racks, so I saw a lot of these problems happening. And I know it's a tricky spot, but the kids are gonna be even worse about throwing the doors open. They're not gonna wait for the parents to come around. So there's more potential conflict between the smaller bodies and the bicyclists. So just some things to keep in mind. And then finally, we could take this opportunity to reduce the speed. It's, 32 miles an hour is the average speed right now, even there in front of the school, 32 miles an hour. That's way too fast for a school zone. The speed limit is 25, let's reduce it to 20, and then maybe we can get to 27. Thanks.
All right, thank you.
I'm Earl Gassard, and I often bike between North Davis and the area south of it. And I usually avoid Anderson and take Eureka by the choice because of the problems next to the Chavez School. And so I commend the idea to swap the bike lane and the parking. And I would encourage the city to think doing that more often around the city so that we could have more protected bike lanes.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Sarah Golden. I'm a parent of Cesar Chavez students, and I live in North Davis, and I bike them to school down Anderson from North Davis every morning. Sorry, I missed the presentation, so just running off of the proposed map that was included on your website, I wanted to raise a few potential issues that I noticed. I want to echo what Trish said about the doors opening into the bike lane. I can see that as being a really big concern. I mean, basically coming down on Anderson, it's a gauntlet as it is. This would just move the gauntlet to the other side of the cars. You're still dealing with the car doors. And then I had a question about why the bike lanes are swerving around the islands in the intersection. I see that you want to make sure that traffic's not cutting the corners, but squishing the bikes in with the pedestrians. Anderson is a major bike commuting corridor, not just for people like me who are dropping off students, but university students and professionals who are trying to get to work. And I think we have to try to recognize from a cyclist perspective that straight lines are really appreciated, and every time you're diverting, that's a possible accident cause. And then the third thing I wanted to mention is we parents understand that there are other projects in consideration concurrently with this one, and it's been hard to keep track of things that are appearing in the Bicycle Transportation Committee and the Parks and Rec, and there's been meetings for staff about adding additional parking, about possibly, there's a rumor that there's going to knock down the multi-purpose room as part of this, trying to create parking. It's just been kind of an information low area. So if someone would be able to on the project overview website, bring all relevant pieces that might pertain to each other into one place before the community meeting, I think that conversation would save some time. Since I think part of that project is supposed to mitigate lost parking spaces for this project, but maybe that was just with Site Concept 1 and you've gone with Site Concept 2. In any case, I look forward to hearing more, and thanks for the opportunity to comment.
Great, thank you very much. Is there any additional public comment? Okay, if there is no more public comment, I'd like to open it up for discussion by commissioners. Any commissioners have any?
Brooke.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, sorry.
Would staff like to?
Yeah, I just wanted to clarify.
Sorry.
Just wanted to clarify one thing. Some great points, but I think I didn't clarify something very well in the presentation. Is the front of the Chavez Elementary School, the right-of-way, that parking would be teacher parking, and so it would be envisioned that that parking would be full and would be carpooling teachers at most. So it wouldn't be children drop-off that would be accessing or hitting the left side of that bike lane. So that conflict that we were envisioning, we would hope be mostly mitigated. There might be a few teachers who bring children to school, but it wouldn't be a drop-off zone there. The drop-off zone would be moved onto Chavez Elementary School. In doing that, that does remove some parking for teachers on Chavez Elementary, more than would be mitigated by moving that teacher parking onto Anderson. And that is why Chavez is having some discussions. I believe they have 3 alternatives that they're discussing in order to hopefully add a little bit more parking for their teachers to offset what they would lose from this on-site change. Thank you.
I've also got a couple other things I wanted to add. Part of this design, especially with bike lane or parking protected, is putting a buffer between the parking stalls and the bike lane. And that will have a couple of different things. One will have bollards or something to keep the cars from driving into the bike lane. But more importantly for this conversation, it will include an area for the car door to open and not encroach into the bike lane, which will help make sure that we're not having those doors and create the scenario that was described where we're swinging doors into the bike lane. I did want to touch bases on the intersection here. We do show some delineators and other items in those bulb outs. They are temporary. We are looking at quick build options on how to make them more rugged than just paint. But when we started costing this out to see if we could include improving the signal as part of the project, it added signal improvements plus the bulb outs added another $800,000 to the project's construction cost, which is just funding we do not have at this time. It would be part of a long-term project. It's not something this is going to be one and done. There are still a lot of improvements that we are looking at, and it's going to have to be a very phased approach in order to secure those funds and make sure that we get the improvements we need in.
Thank you, Ryan. Okay, with that, I'll open it up for commissioner comment.
Yeah, so thank you, Melody. I really like the design proposal and really appreciate the opportunity to ask some questions and maybe point out some things that we can take notes on. I was on the city council when Chavez Elementary School was being, multi-purpose room was done. At the time, we had hoped, because the Sanderson project, as you know, has been kind of been floating around for 10 years, as Jennifer knows. They weren't really interested in changing the drop-off location. There was pretty solid, a firm no in terms of, hey, when you're doing a multi-purpose room, this is a chance to reconfigure parking. They weren't really interested. And so this doesn't have to do with us so much other than imagine that we give our feedback and then it turns out the school district says, no, we can't lose 20 teacher parking spots. And so this design becomes a little problematic. Having said that, I think, Ryan, you talked about, if I understand correctly, the parking protected bike lanes, there would be a vertical barrier to prevent people from parking in the bike lane. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, so that would make a big difference. So even if the school district, for whatever reason, decided they didn't want to do drop off on their school parcel, having that three-dimensional barrier would be very important, because without that, people will just park in the bike lane. And so that's great to hear, and I appreciate that. But I did want to point out that that makes this design somewhat durable in terms of whether the school does or does not do what we hope they do. The other question, that was kind of a question. The other thing I guess I have a question about is just in terms of timing. Are these, with partnering with the school district, is the timing meant to be roughly concurrent?
Yes, so we have a project memorandum of understanding that's been signed by our council and the school district, laying out how we would split costs and everything for that. And the intent would be that once the designs are complete, they will be packaged into one package and the city will bid the project and then build the project on both the school district and the right-of-way property. So the project will be built at the same time. This, again, alleviates that concern that the city might make improvements and then the school district might not have the support that they think they need. So there may need to be some, modifications to timing. Obviously, with that, it gives it a very summer-focused schedule. And so that does kind of present some additional challenges in terms of overall timing, but that's the current approach to this project.
And that's kind of it for right now. I did have a couple other ones, but I think I'll let my colleagues take a bite at the apple.
Mark? Thank you. I have a number of comments, some in support, some asking for more clarification, and possibly seeing some concerns in part overlap with what I heard from public comments. I think the major red flag for me is that we're talking about a city portion of a plan that really is hard to gauge how it works and how it dovetails with something that is done by the school district, and the only person, well, I'm not going to say that, but it looks like the consultant is the person who might have the full overview, but it's really hard to comment on the improvements in totality with only seeing the city's part of the project. And I understand that the city owns part of the infrastructure and the school does the other, but a true partnership that has the safety of everybody in Davis, including in particular the most vulnerable on the streets, would require us to really just come together and have that discussion. I'm not sure at this point if I understand correctly that we're looking at opening that Rutgers, I think it's the Rutgers intersection, that one, so that we basically have a loop. We're recreating a loop that existed originally, was closed. I actually went there today and biked past them already the meeting. I mean, that loop was effectively closed sometime ago, and now it's going to be reopened. But then I think I heard you say that that was only going to be for school staff?
It's for drop-off, you're correct, that there was an opening there at one point and it's going to be shifted slightly, and then there will be changes on site that allow for a student drop-off area on the property.
So if that's the case, we're looking at a school, Chavez, that current enrollment is 494 students. Most recent active for me bike participation is around 54 students. So that means we're looking at around 440 students who are coming to school, at least not participating in the bike scan. Let's assume some of these kids walk. I'll note that Chavez is a school that is not centered in a district. It draws students from all over town and beyond because of its Spanish immersion enrollment program. So it's probably a school that has the lowest, I mean, the data showed is the lowest amount of in the immediate vicinity children, and that's reflected in the number of kids who actually bike to school. And so let's assume that from those 440 kids, maybe 40 odd or so will bike to school and not scan in. Some of the older kids don't, and a number of them will walk to school. It still leaves around 400 kids who, give or take, don't use biking. Some of them might take the bus, but I don't think that number is that far off. I think the majority of those kids then is going to get ferried to school back and forth by car. So by opening a loop through the school grounds where 400 kids get dropped off by a school, you're talking about 400 vehicles who are going to twice in every drop-off motion, be crossing an unprotected bike lane. One to get on the school grounds, stop, and then one to get off. Those are 800 avoidable conflicts. And if you do that on an annual basis using 180 instructional days, we're talking 140,000 potential opportunities for a collision between a car and a cyclist. Now, most of those will not result in a conflict, but any one of those is basically creating a scenario where you might have a large vehicle crossing an area where any one of the cyclists, whether it's a kid going to school themselves or anybody going through their main thoroughfare, there is a conflict we're creating there that right now we don't have. Because right now, at least, we don't have the majority of these kids being dropped off on school ground. Now, there is right now a conflict where a lot of these kids get dropped off curbside, and there's the door conflict that we talked about. But I worry that by creating that much additional conflict, we're negating some of the actual benefits that I do see in some other parts of the plan. And I really worry about that. I think that's my major concern. Like, we have a school site here, we don't have an on-campus loop, and we're creating one with all the potential conflicts that exist. Now, in a scenario where the school district and the city would actually work hand in hand, you can imagine a scenario where, the comments have been made about potential shifting, where you basically move the entire bike lane further away from the vehicle lane to allow both a loop off vehicle lane, but having the bike lane basically run on its outside so that you avoid the conflict that I just articulated. The space is there, the real estate is there, but because the city does the city portion and the school district does the school district portion, I think that opportunity is not even considered until I know about it. Is that? Give me a nod if you at least understand what it is they're trying to explain.
No, I understand what you're trying to explain. I would like to point out that Rutgers is not going to be uncontrolled. It is a signalized intersection, so we would have an exclusive pedestrian bicycle phase. And I do see that as a benefit to what's out there today, because we would be controlling and channelizing those movements to reduce the conflicts versus what we've got right now, which are cars crossing through the bike lane to get to the parking and let the kids off.
But in doing so, we're creating a lot of cars crossing over and then crossing over again to enter the drop-off zone. And I think that's an additional conflict we're creating. And if you kept that intersection closed, we would not create that conflict. I think that continues to be a concern. I think there's better ways of doing that if we continue the entire service area and actually work together between the school district and the city.
So while we don't have the plans for the school district in front of us, I can speak a little bit to them. And so as we can see on this here, this is the intersection with Rutgers. And on that north side of Rutgers is where we really anticipate all of the pedestrians and student bicyclists to end up. And then they will enter the school from there. And so during that pedestrian scramble phase, they can get safely to that corner. And then at the signalized phase, then the cars will be directed to go into the school district property. So it effectively does create, for just the students, those two lanes of one lane of parking drop-off vehicles and one lane of pedestrians and the school district children, while off-site, anybody who's going through this intersection, right, all the people going to UC Davis and the morning commutes, right now we have a ton of potential conflicts because they cross, the cars that are dropping off children are crossing those bicycles along the entire stretch of Chavez. So this plan, by putting the school district drop-off on the school district property, puts those conflict points to just 2 points, one of which, as Ryan pointed out, is a signalized intersection. So we are, for those through bicyclists who might not be paying quite as much attention, and we are reducing the conflicts with the student drop-off space and those parent drivers.
Yeah, the clarification helps a little bit. I continue to be concerned. We don't have information about signal timing and how much we are interrupting what currently is a through phase for cyclists. If I worry about people not paying attention, it's not cyclists, it's about drivers and their children opening doors and sometimes just using space because they can, because there's no enforcement about who parks in the bike lane. I recognize that's a conflict. I see how this may partially mitigate that, but I worry we're creating additional conflict, and I worry that the school and the city has not developed these plans to be better coordinated, so we have the full package in front of us. On the exit from Rutgers, that's supposed to be a southbound only exit, or is that supposed to be an exit where drivers can turn and effectively go northbound?
The southbound exit, so Rutgers will be in only, and then Anderson, the southern part will be out only.
Right, I understand that.
Right only, yes, right only.
Okay, thank you. If that's the case, please, please, please make it physically impossible for drivers to go north. And bollards will do it. I mean, I understand the concerns about cost, but you can make that so that you have to be a particular kind of person before you're gonna go and try and navigate 2 lanes of traffic, but probably blocking that bike lane, because otherwise you don't have a sight line and creating additional conflict, okay? So, I do like the bike lane on the outside of the parking structure, the parking zone, on the westbound side of Emerson. Thank you for doing that. I guess the reasoning is that every car has a driver, so every single car will have the potential for a door opening on the driver's side, whereas only some drivers will have passengers that might do the same on the other side. So while there is the potential to get bored from both sides of a car, I think statistically speaking, the chances are a little bit less this way, and I really appreciate Ryan clarifying that there's going to be physical space to accommodate for people not paying attention, whether they're children or adults. And even if they do make a mistake and open the door without looking, there is a conflict right away. But I wanted to make the comment that I do appreciate putting the bikes on the outside. I wish we could do it on the eastbound side of the same street for the same reason as well. You can put parking on the outside and bikes on the other side, as is done many other places for the same protection. You basically use the cars as protection for the bike lane. And I would recommend that we look into that because I don't think it needs to require more physical space. So moving on to a general comment about the class of the lanes. I read that it's class 2 protected bike lanes. Wherever possible, please put some vertical elevations in this. Whether they're bollards, I understand that that's the easy way of doing it. I like the idea of doing a quick build. I think it goes a long way of delineating the space, particularly around some of these bulkouts that already exist, where the temptation will be for vehicles to encroach on people too closely if there is nothing but a line of paint. If you have some vertical barriers there, again, it's going to force drivers to just take it a little slower, maybe lose 5 seconds out of their day, but make everybody be a little safer. I have questions about the Sycamore intersection, sorry, the Villanova intersection. Can we at least allow cyclists on Villanova to stay in front of cars so that they are more visible for drivers coming up behind them to reduce the possibility of particularly a right hook? I appreciated the comments and the clarifying suggestions that were made during public comment on how to do the floating bus stop well. I think the floating bus stop, I've seen a number of children at other bus stops basically getting caught and stuck behind buses that we now are making go through a bike lane, and then kids get stuck behind it. I think this prevents that. I'm really in favor. And I think there was some good suggestions made to make sure that these floating bus stops, when we start to do them here, when done right, are offering, I think, some significant bike safety improvements, as long as they maintain accessibility for everyone. The bulb outs I am concerned about, because I see at the intersection there that the bulb outs essentially are forcing bike traffic and car traffic towards each other, and I worry about a right hook situation in any one of those corners. If there is any way that we can delineate a continuous bike space for around the corner of all those 4 intersections, I think that will greatly help. I am not a traffic engineer. I scribbled some pencil lines on here. I would really appreciate if you could look at whether we can make that happen. I think that would make the current intersection, particularly since it's a test phase, and there's probably more improvements happening there later on. I think this is the time to try and see if you can do that a little better. I have one more, and that one more is, I think on the north end side, Anderson on to Radcliffe. Again, my earlier comment on, please just put some physical delineators there, would really help. Particularly for the portions of that intersection, I think the north portion of the southbound lane, sorry, the west portion of the southbound lane, where there isn't space to do spacing between the vehicle lanes and the bike lane, that's a section where if you can start that lane with some delineators, you at least start off with right footing, physically separated space. I have questions about the slip lane northbound to turn right onto Radcliffe. I see what looks to be a fairly large slip lane for Radcliffe, which is, as far as I can tell, a destination. Like it's a neighborhood street, it's not a through street. And we're creating space for lots of vehicles to queue up, and they will. And any vehicle that will use that bike lane as a slip lane will effectively block the bike lane. I see this in many other intersections, right? And I had conversations there. We have, at this particular location, maybe people are using that space because they are not wanting to go the next one over, which is Russell, I think, or Covell, I'm sorry. We have two northbound lanes side by side. And then we're giving drivers the leeway to then use the bike lane as a slip lane. And it only takes one driver to queue up to basically create conflict. And we should just delineate that. The occasional driver that will go right is really not going to meaningfully hold up flow of traffic, again, because this is not a major intersection with lots of traffic that is going to take that right-hand lane. And we have 2 lanes that are vehicles already. I think that right hook lane is the thing that is causing probably the most conflict. But just taking it away, we can reduce that conflict. And I think that too can be done with a quick build type of design. So really please, I would advise you to look into that. I think that's it for now. Sorry for being particular, but I think this is the phase where trying to bring these details to the attention is the right thing to do to see if we can make sure that this design works, so that when we make a more permanent design, it's going to do everybody justice. Thank you.
Brett, and then
Yeah, so thanks for that second bite at the apple. Mark brought something up, and my question I was sort of saving for later is related to one of these questions. I guess I'm curious, in terms of the various concepts that were evaluated before landing on this one, I guess maybe you can explain, I'm not quite understanding, if we do have a parking protected bike lane, why wouldn't that parking be designated as the drop-off zone and the interior of the school just be left for staff parking as is, which, presumably there's one movement in because they're parking there for the day and then they'll leave on the way out, as opposed to 2 movements and then, several hundred of those. And so I'm curious, with the parking protected bike lane zone, those parking spaces it seems like they could be the drop-off zone, and the movement in and out of that drop-off zone would not conflict with any pedestrians or cyclists. So I guess I'm kind of curious how this landed the way it did, and whether that concept was discussed, and why this is superior.
So we did look at that briefly, and you can kind of see here, we do have a 3-foot buffer zone on either side, give or take. And that's simply not enough for a walkway. So if you did a drop-off zone for the children in those parking spaces, and then you had bicycles going through right behind them, we would need to then funnel them to crosswalks to get them across the bike lane. And we don't have enough space to do a walkway then to a crosswalk with, it's close. And it really kind of just created a lot of conflicts between children, especially children who we thought might be without a parent at that point, and those through bicyclists.
So not to be, I was going to say persnickety, but that might date me as being an old person. But help me understand that, because we're asking for something similar at the bus stop. We're asking people to cross the cycle lane, and so I guess how is that different?
That's a much shorter area. It's typically older people using the bus, not children by themselves using the bus. But it is a good point. It is a similar setup.
So, I mean, it seems like, I like how the floating bus stop and the images you provided, the checkerboard, and, you know, visually, it lets people know like something is going on here. If the drop-off zone, I mean, right now, my guess is that the parking protected, the parking in the parking protected bikes zone, the amount of parking is maximized because you're trying to squish in all the staff parking. It seems like there would be the potential for the drop-off zone to be slightly shorter, and using similar treatment as what you've done at the bus stop, there would be the visual cues like, oh, hey, you know, and, you know, the number, yes, it is of a concern, cyclists hitting pedestrians, but probably a little less so than cars hitting pedestrians and cyclists. And this is not meant to be a criticism, it's just a genuine question. Like, I don't know, it's, to me, an interesting idea, sparked by, you know, Mark's kind of question about all those movements in and all those movements out. So, and also it's a little less dependent on the school doing anything. So, I don't know, just thought I'd bring it up.
So, I've got a couple thoughts on this. It's something that we're going to have to look into in more detail. The drop-off being shifted on the campus was part of the original grant application, and that was 2017?
2021.
2021, so I think we all need to revisit that and look at it in a little more detail. I'm also going to have to look at how we do that and create enough of a space that's ADA accessible to make it work. But that is something we will look at and get back to you on.
And you probably pre-anticipated this, I apologize. You know, perhaps the ADA drop-off is within the staff parking zone, and then for the people not needing ADA compliant drop-off can be on that next year. But anyway, thank you. And thank you for your indulgence.
Andy?
Thank you. So a couple of questions. I do echo some of the concerns that have been discussed both in public comments and among the commissioners here about the bus stop design at Anderson, the southbound stop at Anderson and Villanova. Just not being a transit rider myself, and definitely have ridden a lot of transit like here and around the country and world, but in systems of varying quality. I'll say in general that Davis, I'd say, is certainly one of the better systems. In general, we have one of the better systems for a city of our size, so I want to start with that compliment. But in my transit riding experience and my bike riding experience, I've never seen, like, when I've seen stops like with floating bus islands. I've been there, as Anthony discussed in his comment, and they tend to be like raised stops. And those do include, definitely a more quick build, like stops, like I know one that I think of, like in DC, in Washington DC, where I lived for a while on Florida Avenue, had a couple of quick build bus stops where there was a two-way cycle track put in, and there was a quick build, like with some of those like elevated, like an elevated rubber platform. So that could be one example to potentially look at if you choose to go in that direction. But I think, if there's going to be an island, again, even if it is like more temporary type infrastructure due to cost concerns, I think it's if it's going to be an island as opposed to just a conventional stop like at the curb, but I think there needs to be some elevated part of it for it to be viable. And I think just that if it's like a street level design like this, just the conflicts between people biking and people trying to get on the bus, and especially the bus riders with mobility devices and the ADA access. I just don't see how. I just don't see it being feasible. Like this design, I think could lead to a lot of issues. But so I think if you're going to stick with a stop at this location, I think that would be again looking at some of those either if you want to do an island stop, and even looking at some of those like more quick build, like rubber elevated type infrastructure. But another thought came to mind, which I was doing a bit of research before the meeting, and of course, this is like Anderson and Villanova is kind of a tricky situation, just because of the design of that intersection. But then I noticed also with the Anderson and Hanover northbound stop currently, which it didn't seem like there was any major change planned for that bus stop, but I did notice that there were cars on the picture of that stop on Google Maps. There actually were cars parked in the stop, which is a more general issue that I know we've had discussion on here at the commission before, but and it's not the only stop in the city that has that issue, but is something that indicates that that's another place where there could be design issues with the bus stop. But this got me thinking, I didn't see a stop, I don't think there's a stop actually in front of the school. So when the students or staff using the bus to get to school would either use the Villanova stop or the stop, or wait, no, it wasn't Hanover, it was Amherst, the street to the south. Sorry about that, sorry for the error there. But students and staff would use one of those two stops to get to the school. This had me thinking, like, is there potential for consolidating those stops potentially in front of the campus where or both, I mean, there could be better opportunity where it wouldn't be like right at an intersection, so there could be potential to incorporate that into the project and build a more permanent, well-built stop that would be actually more convenient, in a more convenient location for riders and potentially avoid some of these design challenges. And then that also, I mean, having the stop right in front of the school could help mitigate some of the, like some of the staff, I mean, you mentioned that some of the proposed loss of staff parking on campus wouldn't be fully mitigated by the parking in front of the protected bike lane. This actually got me thinking to my own high school experience, which I think I've brought up here at the commission in a couple other contexts before, but essentially when I went to a high school in Sacramento, in an area that in general is much more hostile to biking in transit, but even there they actually had for staff and in high school students who were old enough to drive, had a satellite lot essentially at a church that was underutilized during the day, and then actually ran a shuttle to get them into campus. So I was thinking here there could be potential, given that there's quite frequent Unitransit and YOLO bus service already at the campus, looking at locations, given the Covell and Sycamore shopping mall would be like one potential option where there could be opportunity to mitigate some of that lost parking by having staff park at like a more satellite underutilized.
I'm sorry, I just would like to point out that that would require discussion with the union and would be a whole different situation to satellite teachers to their workplace.
But it would be an option, given that, it sounds like in the current situation, there would be less parking than there is now, so it would be an option for folks to, just something to look at. And again, I know it's not gonna be designed tonight, there certainly would be further discussion, but it just is an option to consider, and there could be, and there even could potentially be, given the frequent bus service that's there, I mean, it could be that they're offered, full monthly passes to the bus system for staff who would choose to do that. But again, just something to look at as an option as one way to potentially mitigate those lost parking spots.
Thank you. Actually, I had a couple of questions. Where is the major bike parking area, particularly in relation to Rutgers there, where the entrance is to the school?
It's actually behind the school if you go down this driveway. And then it's off to the side right here off the screen.
So it's the idea that, so students who are going southbound are essentially turning in before crossing?
Yeah, if you're heading southbound, you're coming in like this. And the intent of the scramble here was instead of having students try to do a two-stage crossing to get there to the bike parking, they would only have to cross at one stage.
Okay, and then I just kind of want to reiterate Mark's comment on the length of the conflict zone there near Radcliffe. That seems really excessive. And as I mentioned before, there seems to be a lot of using bike lanes as turning lanes in Davis. So yeah, I would have some concerns about the length of that conflict zone and making it sort of a attraction to become, as Mark said, a slip lane for right-hand turns there.
So yes, it's way too long. It's going to be cut down to 75 feet, which is probably in half.
Okay.
I do want to stress that these are 30% plans and they're still working through many, many details.
And we're happy to provide our input on that. So, are there any other commissioner comments? Skylar?
I guess I would say I find it a little interesting that the other side of Anderson doesn't appear to be as much part of this this plan, because I think that a lot of the
I appreciate that there are a lot of complexities, and that staff parking is pretty much essential and not really the city's business, frankly, to be dealing with. That's pretty firmly within the district's purview. But obviously, I think everyone who's spoken so far on this commission is a little bit uncomfortable with the way that the bike lane will be kind of carnival-like in this stretch of one of the busiest, bike busiest thoroughfares in the city. I would think that doing something on the other side of the street that is not adjacent to the school might be, there might be some opportunity there. I don't know exactly how that would work, but perhaps, you know, if parking has to be culled somewhere, that would be something the city could actually do, where the city doesn't really have the, I think, same flexibility. Anyway, I don't know what to say, other than to say this is an imperfect situation. I took a look at the sort of map of the area. Ideally, I want to see the school drop off in the back of the school. Back of the school here is houses, so that's not going to work. So yeah, I guess I commend staff for coming up with as good of a solution here as they have. I think that this is a difficult situation, and I appreciate how difficult it is to work with the school district as well.
Mark?
Yeah, thank you, and thanks for indulging all these comments. I echo what my colleague is saying. It's hard to redo something that's been built and around for some time. I appreciate my colleague for just bringing up the obvious possibility to some of us that having parking on both sides of the street for all city streets in Davis is something that we need to take a look at. And this particular stretch of 2 blocks, that gives you about 10 feet, 8 to 10 feet worth of room to play with. That may make your job a lot easier. And I will add to that this is city infrastructure that nobody right now is paying for. And I think everybody, and all the residents of the houses along those roads have garages and driveways in addition to having access to street parking. So I think there is an opportunity there to take another look, particularly as it's been noted, this is a main bike thoroughfare, and what's not being noted yet, but we all know, is we need to really double down and making biking easier, and the way to do it is make it safer. And the other comment I'll make is a quick Google search count of the current situation. I think I counted 43 cars parked on school grounds. Now, I don't know what the staffing level is of Chavez, but I don't think it's going to be much more than 43 people. So, again, the idea of not opening that, and again, not wanting to overstep and suggest what the school should be doing, but in a discussion in partnership, it looks like if they so chose, and I would agree if they did, they could prioritize parking for all their staff who come by car in the existing situation without having to create this on-site school drop-offs and the conflicts that it generates. Maybe missing something, but I'm not sure if the parking needs to be the problem here, because there seems to be sufficient parking opportunity right now for most, if not all, of the school staff. But I don't know if you have that information there. I'm not privy to.
So, yes, they do have adequate parking for their school staff right now. And so with the addition of the on-site drop-off, it would remove parking in most configurations. And so that's why the parking would be moved off-site. So they're not seeking to add more parking, they're seeking to balance with this project.
Thank you. Is there any other commissioner comments or feedback at this point? Andy?
I think just one other very quick comment on the Anderson and Villanova intersection. It's just I know that like I know you mentioned that improving like that traffic signal would be a more costly part of the project that would happen later. So I understand that, but just did want to point out that and that is I mean Villanova, as you know, is part of the bike loop, and I'd say that intersection is like a bit more of a pain point currently on the bike loop, just because you have the way the light's set up, because it doesn't detect bikes. I mean, if you want to get it to turn and there's no car there, you have to pull out of traffic and press the, that you have to pull to the side and press the bike button. And I'll just say personally, I mean, that leads to, rather than doing that, I tend to, a lot of the time, I'll tend to treat that intersection as an Idaho stop. Which might not be in the interest of the city, but I think a lot of people that bike on Villanova would see that as the optimal choice right now, given the current setup. So just wanted to flag that as something to consider, and hopefully do what you can to expedite or somehow introduce something to make it so you're not having to pull out of traffic to press the bike button, just in terms of adjusting the timing of that signal or whatnot.
Great. Well, Melody, thank you very much for answering all our questions, and I hope that we provide some valuable feedback on this, and we'll look forward to getting a chance to look at this a little later, and hopefully also seeing it in relation to whatever the district is going to do with their portion of the project.
Yes, we're anticipating that we'll be doing some joint outreach with the district in the coming months as they have plans and we have a little bit more established plans. Thank you so much for all your feedback. We'll definitely be incorporating. Thank you.
Thank you. With that, we'll move on to the next item, the Public Works Engineering Transportation and Traffic Impact Study Guidelines. Ryan?
Yeah, so I've got this item. I did not put together a PowerPoint for this one, mostly because my guidelines are about 4 pages. But just a little bit of background. Working, especially through Chipotle and a couple other recent projects that the planning department's been taking to the planning commission, it occurred to me that we didn't actually have a policy on how or when we do traffic studies. And I was kind of going back and forth if we wait for the general plan update, because that's going to change a lot of this, or if we need something kind of as placeholder. I opted for the placeholder approach, which is what I'm going to present to you. I'm going to take your input on this one, any feedback you have, and then it would go to the planning commission and ultimately the city council for approval. So that's kind of the schedule we're looking at. And I was just going to kind of go through what I've got here and open it up for any questions. So I think the first thing is there's a distinction on the different types of traffic studies we're doing. And the two things right here I'm talking about are a more formal traffic study where we look at various build-out alternatives and scenarios and that type of level of service analysis and consistency with our general plan. That's a little bit different than when we start talking about CEQA, now that CEQA is VMT. And I kind of look at these things as two different approaches. And then the third thing is, especially on the drive-thrus, since at this point I have concern about all drive-thrus, I ask them for a queuing analysis. It's not going to be a full study that's looking at multiple scenarios, but just show me that your drive-thru is not queuing traffic in such a way that it's a hazard or a distraction to someone else. When we look at this, I'm really kind of generating the need for these more detailed studies based on the volume. How much traffic is your project going to generate? Both as daily trips or AM or PM peak hour trips. And there's just a few ways we're looking at 500 new daily trips, 100 new AM or PM trips, or 10% increase in traffic. The other thing I'm really looking at is, do we have a known issue or close to having a known issue within proximity of your project that you might affect? In which case we would also be looking at doing some sort of traffic study. The thing that's been different over the last couple of years, especially for housing projects that have an affordable component, they are actually exempt from certain requirements, including traffic studies in some cases. So I've had projects that meet these requirements or get close to it that don't. There's no ability to require the traffic study. From there, we're really looking at some trip generation estimates. I'm looking at, well, the document we're using is ITE Trip Generation, which is a nationwide, ITE is the Institute of Transportation Engineers. And their big publication is Trip Generation, which is a giant statistical warehouse of information about trip generation based on various land uses. So have you ever heard that a single-family residence produces 10 trips a day? That came from ITE. The number's probably a little bit closer to 9.4 right now. But they've got warehouses, stadiums, apartment complexes, anything shy of SeaWorld. And if that comes up, I know where to get those numbers from. Then we kind of look at how the trips are going to be circulated or transferred throughout the network. It's a mixed-use project. Some of those trips might be internal to the project, people walking to the grocery store and then back and not actually exiting the site. Some of it might be pass-by trips on your way home, you swing by the grocery store for milk or whatever those details are. We start looking at that and getting into that analysis and distributing that traffic across the network. And this just kind of goes into existing traffic data that are required. Try to use the existing data I have when at all possible. The Village Farms local traffic analysis has an appendix that just has all the data they collected across not quite 50 intersections. And that's a warehouse that would be used for other projects in the next couple of years that come online. Identify what the peak periods are, what we think, well, for the generator, if it's something like a school versus what else, and what scenarios, what times of day we need to look at. And then we get into kind of scenario analysis and expect multiple, show me what the existing traffic is, the existing congestion issues, show us what existing plus project are, existing plus all approved, and then a couple cumulative scenarios, which would essentially build out of the general plan. And that's really what you're going to see in these very detailed, larger projects, especially like the annexation projects, where they're going to look at multiple different scenarios, and then we start talking about if there are impacts, what mitigations are the projects to address, what mitigations are partially the projects to address, or what might be something existing that we might not be able to ask for anything to address these. And then I also am asking for internal circulation, access management. I really want to show, again, those driveway studies and other items like that. I want to show how you're interacting with or connecting to our trail network if it's nearby. I don't want to see our trail and then a brick wall preventing people to get to and from the site. Really show how this is going to connect to the larger data circulation network to the benefit of everyone. Davis general plan still uses a level of service capacity metric. We're still looking at level of service for these studies. It's not part of CEQA, but our general plan requires it. The city's level of service threshold is E is acceptable, F is not, but in some cases the council can waive that F or that E. And those are probably cases where it's not feasible or realistic to start expanding road infrastructure to address the level of service issue, like downtown. And then I talked a little bit about mitigation, fair share, active mode. I'm big on sight distance. We have to have good visibility between anyone on the road so that people can make good decisions. I want everything, including parking, to be consistent with our policies and standards. This is all stuff that needs to be included in these traffic studies. And then transit stop amenities and showing if there's a need for additional ridership. This really comes into play with the apartment complexes. Plaza 2555, which is at Callan Research Park, actually put in a new transit stop to accommodate the anticipated increase of traffic that they are going to, or transit users that they might have. And finally, the VMT analysis. Our VMT analysis process, we don't have a VMT policy in the city yet. Again, that's probably something that's gonna come online or shortly after the general plan. But based on work that was done with DISC and some other projects in town, we've used SACSTIM and we've used OPR, which is now LCI, which is the state CEQA clearinghouse. Technical advisory on evaluating transportation impacts in state law. And this is kind of laying out the thresholds we're using, which VMTally analysis is used for which type of project we're evaluating. And partly that is, when I say VMT analysis, it could be one of three things, depending on whether it's a roadway widening project, it's a residential project, or it's some other type of development project. And at that point, kind of concludes my comments, and I'd love to answer any questions.
Great, thank you very much, Ryan. Are there any clarifying questions from commissioners at this point? Apparently we have no questions. So with that, I'd like to open it up to public comment.
Hi, Trish Price again with Bike Davis. Thanks, Ryan. I heard a couple of kind of vague words like vicinity and proximity, near. Are there definitions for those words? I think it's important to know. I would also recommend that in sightline considerations, you consider mature landscaping, lots of landscaping issues and sightline issues around town, especially for cycling and pedestrians. And I had one more point, but obviously it wasn't important because I can't remember.
Thank you. Do you want to respond on that?
Yeah, so unfortunately, vicinity and proximity are somewhat vague. Anything normally within a quarter of a mile of the project I'd look at. But if I had a project that we knew was half a mile away from like the intersection of Mason 2nd, I would probably, and I knew that a lot of traffic was going to be generated from whatever this project was through that intersection, we'd probably ask one to look at that analysis and we'd expand the scope of what we're looking at. We end up doing this kind of trip generation distribution component where we look at the traffic we anticipate the project's going to generate. And we look at, based on SACSIM modeling or any other information we have, what direction we think it's going to go from the project to kind of identify what intersections would be impacted on our road segments. With a bigger project like Village Farms, it actually looks at a number of intersections in the county, and it looks at the interchange at Mace and 80, because it's generating a significant amount of traffic, and we want to make sure that all the facilities could potentially impact our interest.
Thank you. Is there any other public comment on this question? Okay, with that, I'll open it up to discussion from commissioners. Andy?
Thank you, and thank you for the presentation on this. Appreciate the work that went into it, and very glad to see that the broad focus of these proposed studies, that they wouldn't just be on like car circulation, but like the general access to the trails, as well as the impacts to transit service. I know that an example of that was the big expansion of West Village that happened during the pandemic. When the students came back, there was hugely increased crowding on the V-line for Unitrans, as well as general changes on the ridership patterns of the whole system. So definitely great to see that you all are looking at that. Really appreciate the direction. One thing I did want to flag or ask a question about is that so just from my work in transportation, I know that the ITE trip generation rates, they're known to overestimate trips for areas with frequent transit service, and in some cases pretty significantly. I know there was like a study, and this isn't just in like really dense like older transit-oriented cities, but even in more like sprawling metro areas. Like I know in the San Diego area, there was a study that showed that the trip generation rates were overestimated by I think about 30% for areas near the light rail system. So with that in mind, I think just one thing I just wanted to ask about how like proximity to frequent transit will be, if that will be a factor in determining those trip generation rates, and determining like whether a traffic study is required, determine whether a traffic study is required for a new development. Again, the concern being that like because those trip generation rates were a lot of them are based on studies that were done in more like auto-oriented areas where almost all trips happen by car, or that could inadvertently like trigger a study and trigger more red tape for a transit-oriented development.
Yeah, so ITE trips are nationwide averages, and sometimes they have to be taken with a grain of salt. ITE also publishes their data, and will asterisk it if they've got concerns about it, but they still publish the data, so it's available. If we're doing a larger study and we start looking at mode choice, that's where we normally start discounting that. That would be pass by, internal trip capture, walk, bike, transit, and you normally start seeing those automobile trips discounted through those means off of the ITE rates to try to account for that. We're using data from like America Survey, census data, whenever possible, to kind of figure out what those mode splits are and those choices, which gets us down to the block level, which is fairly accurate.
Thank you.
I guess I have a question, two things. One, you sort of anticipate moving more to BMT when the general plan is updated. I would just like to say that level of service can be helpful for community members to better understand where there might be specific impacts. So if I'm not around for that discussion, if you're able to sort of, that's nice to have, and I understand that, things are moving more to the BMT model, which is great, but it's, there can be some unexpected, locations where traffic impacts on a very small scale are dramatically larger than we might anticipate. Another thing was, as we looked at Fifth Street and provided information on level of service based upon current design versus roundabout versus modified roundabout, the way this is presented to us now, this is really about something new generating additional trips, which would then trigger when we do a traffic study. I'm wondering if there might be another piece that's added to this when significant changes are proposed for an existing, pathway, be that, cars, bikes, whatever, it also implies that there would be additional study to help decision makers know what their choices might, involve. So I must admit, I was a little surprised looking at the numbers of the regular roundabout that was presented at Fifth and Pulline. It was kind of, there's sort of this blanket idea that roundabouts are always better. Roundabouts are always better. Well, in that case, it was kind of like, ooh, I didn't see that coming. Having said that, there was variation on the roundabout that did look better. Anyway, the point being, for projects that are making major changes to existing pathways, perhaps that would trigger some objective information so the decision makers, have that to help guide them. That was it. But thank you. I appreciate this.
Mark, did you?
Sure, thank you, Ryan. I hate to disappoint. I think this is helpful. There's a lot to unpack here, and I'm not sure I'm going to be able to capture everything that you implied that you want to do here. I appreciate you articulating that this is going to be a placeholder until the general plan comes in place. And questions that I've been asking myself over the last couple of meetings when it comes to our current methodology of traffic assessment is we seem to have a fairly good handle on vehicle traffic, and then we just are not quite there yet when it comes to quantifying bike and pedestrian, or at least we don't use the same metrics. And I have no idea how you would do that. I'm not presuming that, but it would be very nice if we can basically compare apples to apples. And maybe also, instead of just looking at existing traffic, get more people on board with the idea of what is the traffic that we want, how many people, like not all trips are equal, obviously, and some trips are actually wonderful. If I go to my neighborhood grocery store or public library and I take my bike, I'd say I'll do 10 of those trips a day, and it's still not going to be impacting nearly as much or straining our existing infrastructure. So trip for trip is one thing, but how much shift can we generate from one model to the other? And with that, distance becomes really key. And I echo one of the public comments that, like, is it helpful to articulate like half-a-mile trips, 1 mile trips, 3 mile trips, and what kind of vehicles, other than cars, are reasonable vehicles that would take those trips in? As we want to bring people outside of this room on board with, hey, what are we actually talking about here? What is the kind of traffic that we're hoping to induce away from just vehicles? I'm not sure if this is captured by this level of document, but I've missed kind of this communication piece in how do we kind of bring more people along as to what is the traffic that we're hoping for. And maybe the thing that drove it home for me is in the document we're talking about basically a VMT growth rate that is a growth rate. And at some point, that is incompatible with, like, we can't keep on growing our VMTs. We need to bring that down to, I mean, and the appended document that you so helpfully added, which is from 2018, already very clearly articulates that, right? Like, we have long ago separated GDP and economic growth from VMT, and if you extend the analysis to 2022, 2023, including the pandemic, we know that's the case. So if that's the case, then maybe we can start thinking about maybe not having any VMT growth at all, but maybe a reduction in VMT, particularly with our cap goals in mind. And I think we're at a phase now where we have these goals formulated, and we're now trying to find out how to meet them, and that's hard. And I don't think anybody has the answer to that question, but maybe honesty dictates that we at least bring up that portion of the conversation to get people comfortable with the idea that that's the direction that we need to be heading, rather than having this consistent area of growth. And I don't know if we can use this document as a prelude to a general plan update to really have that conversation, which is the backdrop against which that general plan update needs to happen. Maybe a general comment here, I don't know if you have anything to add to this, how you would potentially use this to spur discussions outside of this room.
So you're getting ahead of me a little bit on a couple things. So really, the purpose of this document is to kind of create transparency and codify how we're evaluating, especially smaller type of redevelopment projects that are coming in now. I've got something on the advanced calendar we'll talk about in a bit that's really going to get into the other question. But right at the start of your comment, you were asking about, this is focused on, and we're talking about, and we have good data for automobile mode. And we have 80 or 90 years of good data for automobile mode, and that data does not exist for any other mode. Transit comes close because they have boardings and ridership and some information, but bike or walking or even the mobility or the use of e-devices as part of like the citywide fleet, those breakdowns are kind of inferred through some census data, and that's what we got. So on the advanced calendar, I've got a transportation plan that we'll talk about in a couple months. And really one of the goals there is to start developing this database, because we need good information so we can measure our progress in implementing cap bills and other things.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'd just like to say I appreciate this document as sort of a bridge to the general plan update, and as a companion to the CEQA analysis, because I think it's important that, you know, we have something outside of just VMT when we're looking at local projects. I think the VMT analysis is obviously very important when we're looking at regional impacts of traffic and meeting our greenhouse gas goals. But I think most people, when they're looking at impacts of new development, are very familiar with the level of service, what that means, what that looks like in front of their house. And then also the, ADT evaluation too. So I think it gives individual people in the community a better handle on what that really means, other than BMT, which is just a very broad goal that we need to meet, but probably doesn't mean as much on a street-by-street basis as ADT and LOS do. So anyway, I appreciate you putting this together. I think it's a good document, like I said, a good companion to the psychoanalysis that is going to be required on this. So. Are there any other commissioner?
We are asking for a motion tonight
Oh, okay.
to approve, and then we're gonna send it off to planning commission and city council.
Is there a motion to approve the document? Is there additional discussion?
Just one quick thing I wanted to add in advance of any vote later on. It's just piggybacking on the discussion of the LOS to VMT switch and some of the context around that. I definitely do share my fellow commissioners' concerns, even though I certainly, of course, as you all well know, I'm definitely generally skeptical of LOS and the way it's been used over the years. But that aside, in terms of the transition to VMT, definitely just do want to reiterate just the importance of doing that in a context-sensitive way. I say this having it work. I reviewed some draft regional transportation plans and stuff like that that pretty much just seem to have done a word search where they searched for LOS and just replaced it with VMT. And as you can imagine, it just results in things that that make no sense, essentially using VMT as a substitute for congestion or delays or whatever. So I think that this is a exhibit A to it is important to do it in a context-sensitive way, so that the transition is effective and still results in a transportation system that works well.
I guess I'll make a motion in a second. I guess, Ryan, could you think of some wording that would get to the fact that this is for new projects or modifications? Because I think the other aspect that I brought up is also important, and I wouldn't want this to preclude, so somehow oh, well, the only time we do these traffic studies is when X, and it's really, we're talking about X, and then, also Y at the same time. So I wouldn't want to close off your ability to say oh, we need a traffic study because we're looking at Russell and Arlington roundabout, right?
Yeah, so I agree with you, and on the city-generated CIP side, we definitely need to do a better job of kind of purpose and need of the project and getting into that level of detail and this level of analysis. For me, this is really focused on the planning department development projects where we have a private applicant coming in to build a new facility, housing, a school, whatever it is, and it doesn't really, it might recommend changes to the infrastructure to accommodate that congestion.
So maybe, right now, the subject is Public Works, Engineering, Transportation, Traffic Impact Study Guidelines. You'd be okay with it for new projects or for
Development.
We want to incorporate, modifications, but I guess that could be considered a new project at some level if some building A is going to be 3 times the size.
Yeah, and what you're looking for on the Public Works project side, for a small project, I call it a project initiation document where we kind of identify what we're trying to fix, the purpose of the need, generate all that traffic data, identify anything else that needs to be addressed as part of it. Or for a larger project, Caltrans would call it a project report, where we go into a very detailed analysis of what we're modifying, why we're modifying, and what the benefits are.
So
for this, let me find that. Can you jump to? I think what you're looking for is the subject being changed to the Public Works, E&T, Traffic Impact Study Guidelines for development.
okay, so I'd make a motion to approve the recommendation with a slight modification of title.
I have a few, kind of going back to the beginning here. So what's exactly the status
Sorry,
quo?
hold on, we have a motion,
Okay.
so,
I'll second for discussion.
okay. It's been moved and seconded. Is there any discussion on the motion?
Yeah, sure. I just want to better understand the status quo on this situation. Like, we have a new development. What happens right now? How do you decide whether it triggers a traffic study or not? I'm not sure I totally understand.
Well, informally, I was using this process. We just didn't have it written down anywhere. And this is really to formalize what we've been doing, to make sure that there's some transparency, people know how we're coming up with these decisions, and why we're asking for traffic studies, or in some cases, why we're not asking for these large formal traffic studies. Specifically, there were a couple projects with drive-throughs, and in both cases, they were low ADT projects. And I just asked for essentially a traffic ladder showing me what the queuing was going to be for the driveways. Make sure that queuing wasn't going to fill their own parking lot or back into the street. And we didn't go into this huge process.
I see. Okay. So it wouldn't change kind of the number, or it's more about transparency?
Yeah, it's really about documenting how and why, getting it in front of the decision makers, which in this case, I wanted to make sure the Transportation Commission knew what was going on. The Planning Commission is the one that normally sees these reports, so they'll be looking at this. And then finally, the City Council will have to approve it as a policy if that's the way they want to go.
Mark?
Yeah, maybe another clarifying question then on process here. Does this give the city any additional tools or leeway to expect or require from future applicants what they need to do as part of the project that they're proposing that are not already required? Or would that really be contingent on actual general plan?
I don't think it gives us, well, I don't think it gives us any additional tools to ask for these things. They're things they've already been asking for. The thing that's causing me to hesitate a little bit is there's been a lot of changes to state law around housing. And there's been a lot of, there have been cases where we've been told we can't ask for a study or we can't, there's no need to do a VMT analysis because of projects essentially CEQA exempt by statute. I think that's the thing that's really, I think it's cases like that where those exceptions exist are the only thing that's preventing us from asking for these studies. And just to stress again, as the general plan moves forward, I expect this to change. I'm not sure what our new policies or our new metrics are to evaluate the health of the transportation system, but I expect that we'll have at least some new policies that we're looking at as part of this, and this document will be updated. I also expect that we're going to, at some point, coming out of the general plan, develop a more thorough VMT analysis. And I expect my 4-page document's probably going to go into like a 40-page document.
Is there any other discussion on the motion? Okay, if there's no more discussion on the motion, it's been moved and seconded. All in favor say aye.
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 All opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Okay, our next item is our March meeting date. Jennifer, do you want to?
Sorry, it's actually the April meeting date.
I mean, sorry, April.
I made a few errors in here with the word March.
This is March. April.
We have to move our April meeting date from April 14th to April 21st, so we're looking for approval, a motion, or just like a straw poll that you all agree that April 21st works.
I think the clerk would like a motion.
I guess the first question is that a hardship for anybody, or is, I mean, we're gonna have enough people to make a quorum, correct? I mean,
Yes. You will need a quorum.
Unfortunately, I won't be able to make it, but please go ahead with whatever you think best.
is there anyone else that would be unable to make that meeting date? Okay, so that would be 5 if I can count. Does that, and that gets us to a quorum, correct?
Yes, it does.
If there's no other discussion on that, would someone like to move that we approve the shift of the April meeting to April 21st?
So moved.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. If there's no discussion, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries unanimously. We will meet April 21st. Okay. Next item on the agenda is the long range, we don't have any subcommittees.
Oh, no, it is the long range.
It is the long range.
Yeah, long range calendar.
So the next item is the long range calendar. Jennifer, could you provide an overview for us, please?
So I've got this
Ryan?
one. So we got the April meeting, which was just moved to special meeting. We're gonna be talking about the Village Farms local traffic analysis, which is available on the project website right now, and I believe I emailed a link out to everyone. Then we're gonna talk about the annual speed hump program, and finally, a Fifth Street quick build plan to address some right angle collisions with IJ and K streets. I expected this will be a very well attended meeting. In May, we're going to talk about the Moving Transportation Forward Plan, which I touched on briefly in the previous item. We're hoping to have a discussion about traffic safety near the schools, and a short-range transit plan update from Unitrans, as well as the Unitrans service changes. And I'm hoping to have the information for an update on Mace Boulevard. June, I'm hoping to update transportation grants. July, there will be no meeting. In August, we're looking at a couple of Unitrans items, the program and projects, and then Unitrans and Davis Community Transit safety plans. Still to be scheduled is an update on the wayfinding projects and the Davis bike maps.
Great, thank you. Are there any clarifying questions about the long range calendar? I actually have one question. On the school safety one, will it be represented from the school district there to be part of that discussion?
We're going to extend an invite to the school district. I'm also going to extend an invite to Davis PD and see who we can get there.
Great. There any other questions regarding the long range calendar? Okay, if there's, would anybody from the public like to comment? Thank you. Yeah, sorry, on the long range calendar. I always forget that part. If there's no public comment on the long range calendar, and I assume there's no more commissioner discussion, is there a motion to adjourn the meeting?
So moved.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded to adjourn. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, motion carries. Thank you all very much for being here this evening.